Okay, everybody. This is my cousin, mi prima bonita, Reina.
Hi,
Um,
everybody.
I don't know if you would describe yourself as an ex-feminist. I don't know. Would you describe yourself that?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes,
'Cause-
definitely. A reformed feminist, a
Yeah,
very staunch and radical,
yeah.
prior
Good.
feminist.
So for
Yeah.
everybody, even though we're cousins, I'm the cousin. Me and my brother's a lot older than her and the rest of our cousins, and I always kind of moved around about a bunch. I was in Hawaii. I left home at a young age. So although I knew Reina and I spent time with her, she's real small. There was probably like a 20-year period where nobody from our family really saw us. So, I knew
Hmm.
you were a feminist. I just didn't know how deep, but I guess you were one of those. You were one
Oh,
of
I was.
those.
Yes.
So
Yes.
my position on feminism is, I look at it like this. So I look at what Jesus taught. I look at what the Bible teaches. I look at families who follow his teachings. And more, when I think of Jesus, if I had to put his teachings in a nutshell, is to have discipline and structure, right? He's the head of the church. Everybody has their roles, their duties, and we're supposed to respect our duties and roles. None of us are better than each other. He's above all of us. Men and
Hmm.
women were equal in value, but very different in purpose, even by design, like hormonally, right? I always tell people this: if you get a man and you put him through some hard times, he's gonna overcome that, and he'll gain character and strength. And from that, right? You put a
Yeah.
female through that, she's probably gonna come out of that with trauma, right? And it's just the
Hmm.
way it is. We're
Hmm.
built differently, even
Hmm.
hormonally. Like men, if you give a man a challenge, whether it's physical, intellectual, it doesn't matter what it is. If you put a man through stress, he overcomes it, his testosterone levels will grow. So it
Hmm.
literally he gets a hormonal reward from hard times. Even like video games, you play a video game, guys, they conquer. Yeah, it's like men.
Hmm.
There's a reward factor God put inside us to overcome hard
Yeah.
times. That's why men
Yeah.
like all the hard things. Women don't
Yeah.
have that. Women release estrogen
Hmm.
when they express their feelings and their emotions. Like women come around like, oh my gosh, I had a hard day, and this and that, and the
Hmm.
other women like, oh my god, and then they feel happy, right? When men do
Hmm.
that,
Yeah.
it makes us like if I sit and complain with my buddies, they'll probably listen to me, but I'm not gonna feel better. I'm gonna feel like crap
No.
after. But if I
Yeah.
get up and be like, let's go hit the gym, I'll feel better after that. So we're just so different on every aspect. I mean, hormonally, God's design, and what feminism, along with other ideologies, have done is said, screw that. Uh-uh. We're equal. Yes, equal in value, I agree, but not equal in
Yeah.
purpose. And it's
Yeah.
taken women and said, well, you deserve to be here doing what men do, and men should be more soft. And it's just confused and rearranged everything. And nobody knows what the hell's going on no more. People are getting divorced. People go into marriage and they don't realize it's a religious sacrament. It's always been that. And it's a commitment for life. And feminism attacked that. Feminism attacked
Yeah.
other structures. Every foundational structure that Christ put in place, the church put in place, has been attacked at its root. All you gotta do is look at what Jesus taught, look at what feminism teaches, and it's like, oh, these two are completely polar opposites. And then it's
Yeah.
like I'm like, it's a freaking antichrist ideology. So, a lot of people they don't even give me a chance to say this. They're like, oh, he hates women. No, I love women. I want to pull them out of this. If it was up to me, women would be protected. You only have to work if you want to. Do whatever you
Yeah.
want. Let me take care of you. But in exchange, cooperate with me, encourage me,
Yeah.
tell me I'm a big, strong man, and I'll go slay the dragon
Yeah.
for you, and I'll bring you
Yeah.
you know what I mean? If you want to have babies, just have a bunch. If not, if you want to wait, you want to travel, whatever, but cooperate with us. Men, we're like dogs, we just want to make you happy. So that's kind of my position. And I've seen this for a long time. I grew up, well, you're my cousin, so you know some of the women in our family. I heard my mom told me stories about our grandma who passed now. I mean, she was mean to me too. She was mean to me at a very young age. So I just sensed that animosity towards men at a young age. Even the curse put on Adam and Eve, like Eve, you're gonna want to control him, but he's always gonna rule over you. In every relationship that's failed that I've seen, is this controlling mechanism over the man, and the man gives into it, and then the respect is lost, and then it falls apart. So that's where I see it. I believe if we could reverse this, we could get this country back. Babies will start being born. Women will be happy. Men will be happy. We'll get rid of all the evil. I mean, for the most part. So that's kind of where I come from. It. I don't hate women. I hate this ideology because it comes straight from the pits of hell. You know what I mean? But go ahead. I guess for you, like I said, I missed a big gap of your life, and I'm pretty sure you would say the brainwashing started as soon as she could understand language, right? What do you think when you think as far back as you can remember? What were those moments where you would be like, wow, when I was 5, that was definitely some programming or some brainwashing. Do you have any memories like that from a young age?
Not too much from that young. I'll talk about when it started, but I think I think my mom used to say that your mom would have loved me as a daughter too because I loved being girly. I love being feminine. Like I've just always been that way. I love the pink, the ruffles, the sparkles, all of it, always. And so, my mom and I just, had so much fun, together growing up with that. But and so, that was like really nurtured in me. But when I started going to school, public school. Um, yeah, I think the earliest was kind of like messages like, um, you can be whatever you want to be in this world, dream big, be a doctor, be an astronaut, be a lawyer, all these things. Um, and it was never, you can be a mom, you can be a wife, you know. Um, in fact, the message, going into, as I got older and into high school was like, Um, I explicitly remember feeling that, like feeling the kind of subliminal messages of like getting pregnant young would be like the worst, biggest waste of my life that could possibly happen. So yeah, lots of just kind of like implicit like devaluing of motherhood and just career accomplishments, degrees, just chasing all those things was the best thing that I could do with my life and my life's purpose. That is what was drilled into me, school. And then parents, and reinforcing that, and it's like I can see, my parents being well-meaning, they wanted me to be, successful and have money and not struggle in that way, but them not coming from like a biblical, mindset and perspective, like, didn't understand like that they were, essentially like telling me like that, marriage and family was not something that I needed to be concerned about or to prepare my life for, or to, if I did want a career, to like think about like, my timeline with having children and all that stuff and how that was going to fit into my life. And then, of course, all of that is only reinforced by your peers and the culture. Um, so I think the really like hard indoctrination was in high school when there was a male teacher who started an after school women's studies class.
Man,
Yeah, so, some of my like girlfriends were like, "Oh, let's go to this class." Like, he's, teaching us about like, how empowered we can be, blah, blah, blah. And so, went there, drank all that Kool-Aid, which at the time felt, like validating, or like it was like I was being heard, in some ways.
this is in Marin County, right?
This is in Sonoma County.
Okay.
Yeah, in Sonoma County. Yeah. But yeah, just that camaraderie, with
Yeah.
friends, and all of you just kind of like hyping each other up and just, going really hard on it. And then that only got worse when I went to San Francisco State University.
Let me add a little story because you talk about high school.
Yeah.
I'll tell you how gangster
Yeah.
I was, how a gangster I am with all this stuff. So, in Hawaii, my daughter, she's 21 now. She's going down the traditional route, I'm so proud of her. But anyways,
She's blessed. Yeah.
yeah, when well, I mean, I'm her dad in my there ain't no feminism gonna get into my family. But anyways, so she was about 16. I was always working. Diana, my wife, she's been staying home for a long time. She told me, she's like, at the school they're trying to have her write a paper about feminism. I'm like, what? What do you mean? And I was like, give me details. So they basically said, here's a scenario, right? To the boys and girls, here's a scenario. Everybody got there's like 5 different scenarios, and the project was, how would you have dealt with this situation as a feminist? And I was like, oh, hell no. I went down to the school. And I was like, I need to talk to teacher such and such. They're like, oh, what's going on? And I was like, my daughter's in his class, and there's a paper they're asking her to write about feminism for her to switch her mind as a feminist. I go, we don't believe that in my house. I go, we do things according to biblical values and traditional. A man has his purpose, a woman has her purpose. You
Hmm.
can't force her to think a way that she hasn't been raised to think. And I don't want her thinking that way. Oh, but we just want them to see every perspective. I go, so have you showed the Christian perspective? because she'll give you that if you need it. But I'm not gonna have her adopt an ideology that I don't support. So they end up pulling
Hmm.
that from the whole school because I made a big old noise. And I called back and I never said who I was because I didn't want her to get embarrassed. And then we just told her like a couple of years ago, I was like, do you know they pulled that feminist thing from your class? I was like, yeah, I went down to the school. And she's like, what? I was like, yeah. So
That's so
I mean,
funny.
that's how
Uh-huh.
she was. This is 5 years ago. So yeah. Yeah. They ain't gonna play in my house. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. No.
So you went to University of San Francisco, you
Yeah.
said?
Yeah, San Francisco State. And then, well, I'll go back to the high school thing. I'll say that
Okay.
the messaging was really that it was always like, even though you're a girl, you can do everything that boys can do and you can do what they do better. And it's like,
Jeez.
so it was really like your goal in life is to be a man
Yeah, it
or
makes
to be
it,
better
it,
than a
it creates
man.
a it creates an adversarial relationship right off the bat.
Yep.
That's
Immediately.
that's the enemy you're combat. You have to if you don't get something done, it's because of them. They're the obstacle. It's
Yep.
horrible. It's pure
Yeah.
demonic.
Yeah, and also again devaluing like the feminine qualities that like make
Yeah,
us different and
exactly.
equating like femininity to weakness and bad and something to not be desired and something to be suppressed.
That's
Which
like
that's
that.
misogyny. That's misogynist.
Exactly. The book Rachel Wilson, she goes into that how women had a better stance in society back in the days. They weren't involved with
Hmm.
politics and all that. They were actually regarded as the moral compass of a society. So the men
Absolutely.
would argue over politics and all that corrupted stuff. Women would come in, say, hey, wait a minute, we need this for the kids, we need this for our schools. And then men would shut up and listen. They're like, okay, we got to take care of it. So they had a better position now. They've gotten down in the muck and the dirt with the men in those jobs. So it's horrible what's done.
Yeah, yeah. So then I went on to San Francisco State University, which is, infamously liberal,
Yeah.
and woke. And I did like all the women's studies classes, was
Wow.
just totally
Wow.
down that pipeline and like did
Yeah.
all that. And in retrospect, I'm like glad that I did that because I see their side of it. And it's true that these people um, criticize parenthood, they criticize children. I like distinctly remember just like my group of friends calling children crotch goblins and like
Wow.
monsters, and that they'd, like were gonna get sterilized as soon as they could, and like how happy they were that they were never gonna have kids, and so that's the crowd of people that I hung out with.
Do you
Um,
still talk to any of those friends from back in the
Few,
days?
hardly any, very few. The ones that I do are the ones who weren't really like the
Okay. Okay.
anti-children, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, almost none of them, no. Yeah. Um and again, just reinforcing everything like, from the young age of like motherhood is this trap to be avoided at all costs. Or, until your late 30s, once like you've had your career, you've done your traveling, you've gotten a chance to be an independent woman and find your truth and discover who you are and all this BS.
Yeah.
I'll talk more about that later, but I'll continue on kind of my timeline and the
Okay. Okay.
journey. So this led me to right after graduation, I moved to Guatemala for a little bit. And there I met my first husband.
Yeah.
And him and I were a perfect match in, in that moment and at that time because we shared a lot of the same values. We shared values around um, being fully independent, partying hard, um, using substances to continue the party,
Mm.
um, and being reckless and making bad decisions. And we worked well together doing that, for a little while. Um, So yeah, long story short, I wanted him to be able to come to the US. So we got engaged 6 weeks after meeting each other, and kind of rushed through that whole process. Um, and me, in my feminist mindset and him being brainwashed, by also by that ideology. And he was someone who had like gone to the university in Guatemala, was like pretty like liberal. Um, didn't really like have those like, super strong traditional values himself either. Um, it was like, yeah, we're just gonna live our lives 50-50, everything's gonna be equal between us, because like, almost like we were bros.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was 24, like 23 when we got together. Um, and then, getting married and like leaning into that, like I found myself still longing to be courted and romanced and swept off my
Yes,
feet and taken
yes.
care of like a princess and nurtured, and all those like kind of instincts like started coming out.
Yeah.
And those urges really took over of like thinking about babies and like
Hmm.
pregnancy. And this was around like 26, 27.
Hmm.
And I wanted to get really healthy and prepare for a pregnancy, so I stopped drinking.
Hmm.
And that was a huge problem for him. In retrospect, when I look back on it now, I did not know how to be a wife. I didn't know how to be a wife, and he did not know how to be a husband. And we were flying to and from Guatemala really frequently. And so I would look at my in-laws, and see the way that they were and their dynamics, like in their marriages, and like noticing that like the women were just blissful. They weren't stressed out. They were happy at home, torteando, making their
Tortilla.
tortillas, like taking care of the kids, like, and I would
Yeah,
like, bring it up to my husband and be like, how come like in Guatemala they see California like this like utopia?
yeah.
Like they all want to be here. And I'm like, and look at us, like we're working our asses off, we're stressed out, we're not happy. And look at them over
Basically,
here,
like
like,
we're tax slaves over here. We're tax slaves.
yeah, yeah. I'm like, they're
Yeah.
living their best lives, like not stressed out. Like, what are we doing wrong? Like, and he's like, don't romanticize poverty. And I'm like, they're fine. We do not
Yeah,
need
don't
all these.
romanticize materialism. Yeah,
Exactly.
don't worship materialism. We don't need much
We
to be happy.
exactly. We do not need all these material luxurious things. Like you
Yeah.
do not need the halo swivel bassinet. You do not need the nursery. You do not need the baby mom. You don't need all that stuff. Okay. Um, and so I kind of, learned from them and like kind of starting to like try to adopt, more of those kinds of customs. I'll never forget this. I, said to my husband at the time, I said, like, it'd be really nice, if eventually, like, maybe we have kids in the future and I could stay home. And he told me, I will never accept that you don't work.
Wow. Ooh, I want to punch. I want to punch.
Meaning, I'll never accept
Oh
that you
yeah.
don't bring in a big chunk of household income.
Mm.
Um, and, like to this day, I'll never forgot that conversation, like the way that that impacted me.
That was a
Um,
huge turnoff, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it
And you're like,
was.
this is not a man,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so me like kind of being in this confused like place where I didn't have, the Bible to guide me. Like I wasn't like raised with, those
Hmm.
values and that
Hmm.
understanding. So I was like, learning about like biblical like submission, and like I craved his leadership. I craved
Yeah.
him
Yeah.
to lead me and to be like the man of the household. And so like I was confused, like trying to reconcile like how can I like accept that if he's the one who's supposed to lead me and submit to that, and then simultaneously like grieving this like desire to like be a stay-at-home mom and like feeling like, oh, maybe I was like dumb for bringing that up. Like maybe
Mhm.
like that wasn't, yeah, we just don't do that here. Like I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, obviously he was very indoctrinated by all the same, ideology, that I was.
Yeah.
Um, in the beginning, I feel like I like to think I was pretty gracious. I tried to not bring up family, but I know how some women in our family are.
Yeah. Hmm.
Bless their hearts, but they had to be like tough, like wives and like moms, and like they
Yeah.
it was hard for them to feel safe. And so I'm sure that I probably, showed up with some of that and adopted
Yep.
that, and, was, probably like I could have been a much better wife. I just didn't know how.
You guys
Um,
both, it's it's not fair to either one of you guys because it's we're submerged in this ideology. I thank God that he put something inside me. I was allergic to it from a very young. I just could not settle
yeah.
anywhere. And I realized, I mean, 46 now, I realize now it's because I've been programmed a certain way by God, and it's to fight against this. And you couldn't force me into it. There were so many. I met a lot of girls when I was young. Girls left. And I swear, if I were to describe to you every single girl I dated, you would think I'm talking about the same girl because they all did the same. All try to control me. they use guilt tripping, all kinds of manipulation tactics to try to like manipulate me to
Mm-hmm.
submission. It
Mm-hmm.
just didn't work. I mean, before my wife, I never really had a serious girlfriend. You know what I mean? And that's all. And
Mm-hmm.
I dated a lot of girls, so. But I
Mm-hmm.
get it. You say you guys didn't stand a chance. You need, now your
Mm-hmm.
son, and if you have some, I hope you hopefully you have 4 or 5 more kids. Now they have a fighting chance because people like me and you we've waken up to this and we're talking against it, and we're talking about in a respectful way where we're shining light on Christ and letting His example. It's like don't learn from me. Look at what Christ taught, and then you'll realize let His example teach us, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
you
Great.
said you and
Um,
him both to
yeah,
me, I see you guys as both of you were innocent. You
we
thankfully woke up out of it, and then what happened?
yeah, yeah. Um, so, we ended up divorcing.
Yeah,
There was a mix of a lot of different things. It wasn't just one thing, but I will say substances, played a big part of that.
yeah,
Um, and he was really brainwashed into this con that feminists sell that
hmm
a woman can have it all and do it all
yeah,
and be it all. Because he wanted me to be a woman who had it all and who could do it all. He wanted
yeah.
me to work, bring in the 50%,
Mhm.
to be the wife, to be taking care of the home, because
Wow.
ultimately the divorce was not something that I wanted. I didn't want to agree to it.
Yeah.
That was ultimately his call. And he said one of his main, um, a big reason for not wanting to get back together was disharmony in the household. And we were always arguing about chores in the house, cleaning, taking care of the home. And again, like I felt like I was doing the best that I could. Like I wanted
hmm
to be that wife that could have a pristine house, that could like have all the things, but I was also busting my butt
hmm
like at my 9 to 5 job,
Yeah.
and I couldn't do it all. And so that is that was like a big kind of catalyst for like the waking up
hmm
from like this ideology and
So how
realizing
long were
like
you guys married total?
4 years.
4 years. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other biggest thing that I learned from that divorce, I had to learn so many things the hard way with this
Yeah,
divorce,
that's the
but
best. That's the best way sometimes, though, because you learn them.
yeah,
If you learn it the
yeah,
hard way, you learn it forever.
I know. But
Yeah.
one of the biggest things that I learned is that God has to be at the center of your marriage.
Mm.
If the
Amen.
Lord is not at the center of your marriage, good luck.
Yeah.
No offense to folks out there, who aren't religious or, even if you're spiritual and you have some type of,
There's
whatever,
only one
like a
true
higher
God. There's
power.
only one true God. I'll debate anybody
Yeah.
on that. Bring it. I'll debate anybody on it. There's only one true God.
But if you do not have a God-centered marriage, a
Yeah.
Christ-centered marriage,
Yeah.
I think that it is very hard
Yeah.
to have a happy marriage
Yeah.
and to not lead on that path to divorce. And we're seeing that in the United States, in our
Mm.
culture with divorce rates, like what are they now? Like
Like
over
about 50,
50%.
yeah,
But
over 50%.
mhm,
Yeah.
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 Um, so that was the biggest thing that I learned from that marriage.
Okay, so then it ended. It was rough, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was awful.
And wait, so this was five,
2020, 2023.
22. Okay, so
Not even that
now,
long
and
ago.
you guys, you've been married for what, 2 years or
My
so?
husband yeah, my husband and I now, yes.
So from the when you split up, I'm sure you had to recover from that. I'm curious because it didn't just you didn't go just from that to now I love Jesus and tried life. No, right? There was a journey. What happened?
Yeah, it was a journey, yeah. Well, that divorce left me so lost, so broken,
Hmm
so depressed. Like you were saying, like my health deteriorated.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I was in such a dark place. I felt like such a failure.
hmm
And with the history of our family, like there just being so much divorce in our
Yeah,
family.
yeah.
I just had all these pressures on myself that just manifested in, a lot of shame,
hmm
of feeling like I thought I was going to be different. I thought I wasn't going to get divorced. And look at
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
I'm freaking like 28, however old I was, years old,
hmm hmm
already done with my first marriage. Um, and so, yeah, that darkness is what brought me to the light, that dark period. Because I had a church that I would go to. with my family, but it was kind of like, yeah, I'd go every now and then, a few times a year, just and but there was a spiritual counselor that I was always close to, and he really uplifted me out of that journey. And yeah, so having a church community, having people, I think is very
Yeah.
important. And just learning more from him was very key for me. At the same time, well, I'll say that at the end of the divorce, one of the last like things that my ex-husband told me before the divorce, like right before we had split up, was I actually don't want children. I don't want any children. I was like, why are you telling me this now?
I know,
Um,
seriously, could have saved a lot of time.
yeah. Yeah. And so I kind of knew like, okay, moving on. I know what I want. I want to, find somebody to have children with, and get married again um, and just bounce back from that. And I'm not gonna like waste my time and BS around. And so I started um, listening to podcasts about motherhood and
Yeah.
parenting and kids. And I came across this incredible author named Suzanne Vanker. So even for if there's any women out there watching this who are liberal, like left wing, like democratic, maybe, maybe you're, feminist minded, like please listen to Suzanne Banker's podcast because she tries to reach a secular audience because there's so many women all over this country, like on the left, who have all these feelings and they have nowhere to go. They don't know who to talk to. They can't talk to their girlfriends about it because they're going to get canceled,
Hmm.
and that's a spot that I found myself in. Like I couldn't talk to anyone about this. But as I kept like listening more and more to her podcast and just like learning more about like this devaluation of marriage and motherhood and trying to figure out like why did my divorce happen? Like what are all these things that I did wrong? I started to wake up from this ideology and see that these seeds that were planted in me
Hmm.
were evil and
Hmm.
like led me to make really bad decisions and live a life so out of alignment with um with God's purpose for me, but also a woman's purpose. Um, so I really credit her, her books, her podcasts for
Suzanne, I'm gonna write that down.
yeah,
Sue.
Suzanne Venker, Venker.
Because I like to teach my daughter stuff, but I'm a man and I'm not that good at teaching girls stuff. But if I
Oh,
point her in the
yes.
direction of, then she'll listen. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And she talks a lot about just like the toxicity of the sexual revolution and
Yeah.
hookup culture and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I will admit pretty quickly after my divorce, I reconnected with somebody from my past, just a
Mhm.
friend from work, Andrew, who is my now
Andrew.
husband.
Hey,
Yeah,
Andrew.
and Andrew, I feel like people in my family try to like act like or make up stuff like it was like like a three, like he was the other man or something like that. It was
Oh
nothing
gosh.
like that. Andrew was the most
I
respectful.
never heard anything like
Like
that because I stay out of the trauma bit. I know
I
that ain't true.
know,
I
I
know.
know, yeah,
Too many
no.
women, too many women start spreading rumors.
I know, I know, I know.
Yeah.
But Andrew is the most such a grounded
Mm.
man who is also had gone through some stuff with like the passing of his mother
Oh
and
man.
kind of we were like on similar paths of kind of coming out of like I mean he was farther along in his journey of coming out of his darkness, but um so I met, reconnected with him at a place where he was so strong, like just
Hmm.
turned 30 and he's like, once all the dust kind of settled from the divorce and I was like open again, he's like I want to be a dad.